July 15, 2010 dawned bright and clear over the waters of Jupiter, Florida. The air was warm with the scent of salt and the ocean stretched out in an endless expanse of deep blue. Gentle waves lapped against the shore as early morning beachgoers staked out their spots, spreading towels and planting umbrellas in the sand. Just offshore, fishing boats bobbed in the distance, and seabirds wheeled overhead, scanning for their morning meal. None of them could have imagined that a few miles away, beneath the surface of the calm waters, something ancient and lethal was watching. Rebecca Hayes, 32, had always been drawn to the ocean. Growing up in coastal Maine, she spent her childhood exploring tide pools, braving frigid Atlantic waters, and competing in long-distance swimming events. Her passion for the sea led her to the University of Miami, where she earned a degree in marine biology in 2000. But for Rebecca, studying the ocean wasn't enough. She needed to be in it, surrounded by the water she loved. An accomplished open water swimmer, she competed in endurance races worldwide, pushing her body to its limits. Her friends admired her fearless nature, her relentless determination. Some, however, worried that she was a little too confident when it came to the risks of the open ocean. That morning, she prepared for another long-distance swim, a routine training session in familiar waters. It was just another day, another challenge. But no amount of experience could account for what lurked unseen beneath the waves. The great white shark is one of the ocean's most fearsome predators, a species that has roamed Earth's waters for over 400 million years. Growing over 20 feet long and weighing as much as 5,000 pounds, these sharks possess an almost unmatched predatory efficiency. Their torpedo-shaped bodies allow them to accelerate with terrifying speed, while their serrated 3-inch-long teeth can shear through flesh and bone with devastating force. Despite their reputation, fatal great white attacks on humans are relatively rare. Most encounters are believed to be cases of mistaken identity, where a shark confuses a swimmer or surfer for its usual prey, seals or sea lions. When a great white does attack, however, the results are often catastrophic. For experienced swimmers like Rebecca, the possibility of encountering a shark was always in the back of her mind, but it was not enough to deter her. Confident in her abilities and aware of the precautions taken during open water training, she approached the ocean with the same fearless determination that had defined her career. That morning, she set out just after sunrise, accompanied by her longtime friend and training partner, 28-year-old Michael Torres. He piloted the support boat alongside her, maintaining a steady pace as she glided through the water. Conditions were near perfect. Calm seas, clear skies, and the water temperatures hovering at a comfortable 78 degrees. By 8:17 a.m., Rebecca had reached the planned training zone 3 miles offshore. The water's clarity extended nearly 100 feet in all directions, offering an unobstructed view of the vast, empty blue. Michael followed her progress from the boat, keeping a careful eye on her steady strokes as she powered through the waves. For 30 minutes, everything was routine. Then, at 8:47 a.m., something shifted. A dark shape emerged from the depths, an immense, shadowy figure moving with the eerie silence of an apex predator. Without warning, the water beneath Rebecca erupted. The 18-foot great white struck with explosive force, launching Rebecca partially out of the water. The impact alone was enough to break ribs and puncture organs. Before she could react, before she could even register what had happened, the shark's massive jaws clamped down. Michael saw it all from the boat. One moment Rebecca was swimming, the next she was airborne. Her body twisted at an unnatural angle as the shark's teeth sank into her torso. The force of the bite was beyond comprehension. Nearly 4,000 pounds per square inch, more than enough to sever limbs and crush bone. The water turned red in an instant. Rebecca's scream was brief, a single sharp cry swallowed by the ocean. The shark, displaying its natural feeding instincts, began thrashing its head side to side, ripping through flesh and muscle. Within seconds, Rebecca was gone. Michael could only watch as the great white disappeared beneath the surface, dragging what remained of his friend into the deep. The Coast Guard arrived at 9:22 a.m., responding to Michael's frantic distress call. A search was launched, but the only trace of Rebecca ever recovered was her torn wetsuit and a single swim fin floating near the attack site. For 3 days, teams scoured the waters, though by the second day the mission had shifted from a rescue effort to a recovery operation. After obtaining Rebecca's information from Michael, authorities contacted her parents, Robert and Linda Hayes, at their home in Maine. The call came as a shock. Rebecca had swum in open waters for years, and the idea that she was simply gone felt impossible. Within hours, they were on a flight to Florida, desperate for answers. At the marina, they watched each search boat return, hoping for any sign of their daughter. Volunteers joined the efforts, combing the shoreline for debris, while Rebecca's friends from the open water swimming community called in, offering support. But with each passing day, the weight of reality settled heavier. She wasn't coming back. On July 19th, commercial fisherman Frank Martinez and his crew were out on the water 20 miles south of the attack site when something caught his attention. A massive great white shark, its sleek body cutting effortlessly through the waves, swam close to the boat. As it passed, Martinez noticed a deep, jagged scar running along its left gill slit, a distinctive marking he had heard about just days earlier. Local authorities had put out a call to fishermen, dive operators, and boat captains in the area, alerting them to be on the lookout for a large great white with a unique scarring pattern. The description matched reports given by Michael Torres, who had seen the unique pattern on the shark during the attack. Martinez immediately contacted authorities, reporting the sighting and giving precise coordinates before the shark disappeared into deeper waters. Marine officials already monitoring the area deployed tracking teams using aerial surveillance and patrol boats. Over the next 2 days, they followed the shark's movements, eventually locating it near a deep-water shelf where large predators often hunt. Believing this was the same shark responsible for Rebecca's death, they made the decision to capture and examine it. When the shark was dissected, what they found left no doubt. Inside its stomach were human remains, fragments of bone, and a shredded section of Rebecca's wetsuit. Michael, the sole witness to Rebecca's death, was deeply shaken and withdrew from open water swimming. In the aftermath, he abandoned the sport entirely, unable to return to the water without remembering what had happened. Her family was devastated. The loss of their daughter left a void that could never be filled, and in the months that followed, they struggled to come to terms with the horrific way she had died. The ocean, once a place of adventure and joy for Rebecca, became something they could no longer look at without pain. It was a warm May morning in 2019 when Thomas Smiley, 65, walked down the beach toward the water at Kapali Beach Park on the western shore of Maui. For the past 14 years, this had been a place of retreat for Thomas and his wife Gail, a sanctuary where they would recharge and reflect. It had been a tradition for them, and now, in his early retirement, Thomas had planned to spend more time enjoying the things he loved: his family, his hobbies, and the serene shores of Hawaii. Thomas had retired just the year before from his successful career as an optometrist, having owned practices in Roseville and Sacramento. But retirement wasn't just about the rest, it was about living life to the fullest, spending more time with his family and pursuing his passions. He'd always been the adventurous type, an antique and muscle car enthusiast, a member of the Sports Car Club of America, and a vintage stock car racer. In fact, just 2 weeks away, he was due to race his prized 1965 Corvette in an advanced pro class on tracks across Northern California. But today, he was looking forward to his last swim before returning to California the following day. Thomas was highly accomplished, having earned an undergraduate degree in cell biology from UCLA and a doctorate in optometry from UC Berkeley. His intellectual pursuits had always been matched by his thirst for adventure. Whether it was racing cars, scuba diving, or swimming in the Pacific, Thomas embraced every opportunity with enthusiasm. This day, however, would take a tragic turn. It was 9 a.m. when he waded into the water alone. Gail, as always, was content to watch from the shore, where the sun warmed the sand and the waves whispered softly. She had no inkling that this would be the last time she would see Thomas alive. Kapali Beach was a picturesque stretch of coastline, with clear turquoise waters that shimmered under the morning sun. But beneath the surface, hidden from the sun's rays, a silent threat was approaching. A tiger shark, one of the largest and most aggressive species of sharks, its movements being tracked by the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Authorities were aware of the predator's presence, but there were no warning signs posted, and tourists continued to enter the water without hesitation. The shark, a 15-foot beast weighing over 1,000 pounds, had been swimming along the shore for hours undisturbed. Thomas, unaware of the danger beneath him, swam parallel to the shore about 60 yards out. He was an experienced swimmer accustomed to the ocean, a man who had spent decades in the water without incident. But as he moved through the calm waters, a shadow began to loom behind him. The tiger shark, drawn to the movement, circled slowly, its massive body cutting through the water with precision. Without warning, the shark lunged. Its massive teeth sank into Thomas's left leg, the sheer force of the bite dragging him beneath the surface. The pain was immediate, excruciating. Thomas knew exactly what was happening. The shark had attacked, but the fight for his life had only just begun. Gail, who had been enjoying the morning from the lanai, heard a commotion. She looked out across the ocean where she saw people pointing and gesturing. There was someone struggling in the water, thrashing around. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it Thomas? She watched for a moment, confused. It wasn't like him to struggle in the water. Thomas was a strong swimmer, confident in the ocean's embrace. But something wasn't right. The man in the water was flailing, his body convulsing in a way that didn't seem natural. Gail's worry deepened. On the shore, bystanders stared helplessly as Thomas fought to make it back to safety. The water around him turned red, clouded with blood as he struggled to stay afloat. He was losing strength, his movements slowing, the attack taking its toll. Witnesses on the beach could only watch in horror as Thomas, his leg mangled, attempted to swim toward the shore, but with every stroke it seemed like he was sinking further. The life-saving jet ski had been scrambled late, too late to intervene before the worst had already happened. By the time the police rescue unit arrived on the watercraft, Thomas was unresponsive, his body barely moving. The shark had retreated, disappearing beneath the surface. The rescuers worked quickly, pulling him onto the jet ski, his body limp and bloodied, a pool of dark water trailing behind them as they sped back toward the shore. Gail stood frozen on the beach, her gaze fixed on the water. The moment the rescuers reached the shore and pulled Thomas's lifeless body from the jet ski, her heart stopped. She knew, without seeing his face, that it was him. It was Thomas. His swimsuit, his build, everything confirmed her worst fear. She ran to him, crying out as she dropped to his side. He was pale, unresponsive. The love of her life, the man she had been inseparable from for over 40 years, was gone. Despite attempts at CPR, it was too late. Thomas's injuries were catastrophic. His left leg severed below the knee, his wrist shredded from fighting off the shark. He had bled out, losing too much blood to survive. The attack came without warning, no signs, no barricades. Thomas, a man who had faced life's challenges with vigor, was caught off guard in the wrong place at the wrong time. His death sent shockwaves through his family. A man who lived for adventure and loved his family deeply, Thomas left behind 3 children and 6 grandchildren, who now mourned his loss. Gail, his wife of 42 years, was left to navigate life without him. Though she didn't blame officials, Gail knew that had they been informed of the shark's presence, Thomas would have stayed on shore. Hawaii averages about 20 shark attacks a year, but Thomas's was the first fatal one since 2015 and the 6th of the year. Some linked the rise in attacks to climate change, but for Gail, none of that mattered. Her world had changed in an instant, and now she would have to move forward without him. It was a bright, sunny morning on June 7, 2024, when Anne Blair Gribben set out with her twin daughters Lulu and Ellie and a group of friends on their first ever beach trip. Seacrest Beach, Florida was the perfect spot for the summer getaway. The warm sand beneath their feet and the gentle waves of the ocean made it an idyllic escape from their small Alabama town of Mountain Brook. The girls, full of energy and excitement, couldn't wait to immerse themselves in the adventure that lay ahead. The day unfolded with carefree laughter as they played volleyball, swam in the crystal clear waters, and basked in the summer sun. By mid-morning, they decided to explore the deeper waters around the first and second sandbars. Armed with a boogie board and a hot pink sparkle float, they ventured into the ocean, laughing and marveling at the marine life, collecting sand dollars as small mementos of their adventure. But as the girls reached the second sandbar, a subtle shift in the water caught their attention. The waves had grown a bit stronger and the once clear water began to take on a murky hue. It was enough to make the group uneasy, but they shrugged off their worries. Their curiosity took the lead, and they swam down to touch the bottom, ensuring the sandbar was safe. The tide shifted, the water murkier still, but they were determined to continue their fun. After a while, Ellie suggested they take a break and head back to the shore. The girls, exhausted from hours of swimming and sun, agreed. They began to make their way back, the soft rhythm of the waves lapping against their legs. But as they swam through the waist-high water, an ominous presence made itself known. Adele, one of their friends, was the first to see it, a shark fin cutting through the water, circling the group. Panic spread like wildfire. Adele screamed, her voice sharp and frantic, alerting the others. Lulu's twin Ellie felt the cold grip of terror, but she instinctively began to swim faster, not looking back to see if the others followed. As she reached the shore, she turned to see the horror unfold. The water, once serene, was now tainted with blood. Lulu, her sister, was still in the water, fighting a relentless predator. A bull shark, its powerful jaws locked tightly around Lulu's arm, dragged her beneath the surface. The 15-year-old thrashed desperately, trying to escape, but the shark was unyielding. It clamped down on her left hand, tearing it away before moving to her right leg. Blood stained the water, dark and shocking, as Lulu struggled to keep her head above water, gasping for air, each breath feeling more like a battle than the one before. Ellie screamed, her voice hoarse with panic. "That's my sister," she cried, her voice trembling as she watched her twin be dragged under. The beachgoers, once blissfully unaware of the looming danger, now scattered in fear. Ellie's heart pounded in her chest as she begged for someone to help. The world seemed to slow, her vision blurring with tears as she clung to the faint hope that someone would reach Lulu before it was too late. The shark finally released Lulu and retreated, but not before leaving her with devastating injuries. Ellie, desperate to help, dove back into the bloodied water, holding Lulu's head to protect it from the crashing waves. Minutes felt like hours as a group of men and doctors who had been vacationing nearby rushed to assist. The chaos around them was a blur, but Ellie stayed focused on her sister, holding her close despite the gruesome sight of her injuries. And their mother arrived moments later. The sight of her daughter, pale and motionless on the sand, was something no mother should ever have to witness. Ellie could only manage a single sentence before the weight of the scene overwhelmed her. "Mom, it's Lulu." Anne collapsed beside her daughter, tears streaming down her face as she took in the horror before her. Volunteers and doctors worked quickly to stabilize Lulu, as the haunting sound of screams and sirens echoed across the beach. An airlift was called and Lulu was rushed to Sacred Heart Hospital in Pensacola, an hour and 20 minutes away. Throughout the ordeal, Ellie remained by her side, holding on to the hope that Lulu would survive. But when doctors revealed the extent of her injuries, it was clear that the attack would leave scars, both physical and emotional. Lulu's right leg had to be amputated just above the knee. and her left hand was also lost in the shark's attack. She had also lost nearly 2/3 of her blood supply and she was in critical condition. Despite everything, Lulu fought to survive. She emerged from the darkness of unconsciousness, her first words a testament to her strength. "I made it." Even as her body was scarred, she maintained her determination. Lulu, who had always dreamed of becoming a doctor, insisted on watching the removal of her central line, her spirit unwavering in the face of the unimaginable. In the days that followed, Lulu underwent several surgeries, each one a step toward recovery. She endured the pain with the same quiet strength that had defined her life up until that point, making jokes and smiling even as her body healed. The beach where the attack had taken place stood eerily silent, a stark reminder of the predator that lurked just beneath the surface. Ellie and her friend Layla returned to the shore one night, finding the beach deserted, as if nature itself was reflecting the somber mood that had gripped them all. Though shark attacks are rare, reports of bull sharks in the area had surfaced in the weeks leading up to the incident. The Bay County Sheriff speculated that the presence of bait fish near the shore might have drawn the shark closer to the sandbar. While many shark bites on humans are believed to be cases of mistaken identity or curiosity, the attack on Lulu served as a chilling reminder of the unpredictability of nature's most dangerous predator. It was October 2010 and the California sun hung heavy in the morning sky, casting a golden glow over Surf Beach near Vandenberg Air Force Base. The air was cool, a crisp reminder that autumn had arrived, but the water still held the warmth of summer. Matthew Garcia and Lucas Ransom had been waiting for this moment for months. College had kept them too busy and they had not seen the ocean for far too long. The surf was calling them back, and after a rare weekend away from campus at Lucas's parents' house in Riverside County, they were eager to dive back in. The trip had started with Lucas's enthusiasm, eager to escape the confines of home as soon as he arrived. His mother Candace had tried to persuade him and Matt to linger, suggesting they spend more time at home before heading to the beach. But Lucas, a seasoned swimmer and licensed lifeguard, was confident and dismissive of her concerns. He had grown up in the surf, as comfortable in the water as he was on land. Candace wasn't worried about the sea itself, it was something deeper, a nagging intuition she couldn't shake, though she couldn't put her finger on why. By the time they reached Surf Beach, the morning had unfolded into a picture-perfect scene. The sun glinted off the water, casting brilliant reflections as surfers filled the waves. The boys joined them, eager to catch up on the waves they'd missed during the past few months. For hours, everything seemed to fall into place. The surf was steady, the water clear, and the sun bright. As the morning wore on, Lucas and Matt found a moment of respite on the sandbank, about 100 yards from shore. The water was chest deep, ideal for a quick break between waves. They planned to catch a few more swells before heading to a food truck to carb up for the rest of the day. Matt lay across his board, soaking in the calm before paddling back out, while Lucas, lying on his stomach, prepared for the next wave. Then the water shifted. A subtle change in the current went unnoticed by the two friends. Beneath the surface, something moved. Fast and quiet, a shadow growing larger. Without warning, the massive shadow of a great white shark appeared, slicing through the water with terrifying precision. The wave that crested ahead of them hid the predator. But as it rose, so too did the shark, its gray body blending with the foam. It was a blur, but unmistakably there. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of teeth. And then, in a flash, the attack was upon them. Matt was standing just 2 feet away from Lucas, and in an instant, a massive body slammed into him. The tail knocked him away, sending him spinning several feet through the water, disoriented and confused. Matt barely had time to register what had just happened before his eyes locked onto the monstrous predator. It was the shark, the great white, its sheer size overwhelming. The predator's focus was not on Matt, it was Lucas. The shark lunged with terrifying speed and its massive jaws clamped down on Lucas. It was like a flash of lightning, a brutal and efficient strike. Lucas barely had time to scream before the beast dragged him beneath the surface in a rush of blood and foam. The air was thick with the sound of splashing, the sharp metallic scent of blood filling the water. Matt, still stunned, reacted without thought. His body moved before his mind could catch up, desperation taking over. He dove into the blood-tinged water, searching frantically. The water around him was thick with red, too murky to see clearly. Then he caught sight of Lucas's dark curls floating on the surface. His friend was still alive, barely, but the clock was ticking. The shark had disappeared, but its presence still hung in the water, a lingering threat beneath the surface. With one hand gripping his board and the other desperately clutching Lucas, Matt paddled furiously toward the shore, the blood staining the water around them, a constant reminder of the danger. Every stroke felt urgent. There was no time to think. The fear that the shark could return at any moment made each second feel like a lifetime. The crowd on the beach had already noticed something was wrong. People screamed and scattered in panic as Matt and Lucas rode a wave toward shore. The sight that greeted them was a nightmare. Lucas's boogie board was still attached to his right foot by the ankle strap, but his left leg was gone. The shark had ripped it clean off, leaving only a mangled stump. Blood poured from the wound, soaking the sand beneath him, but Lucas was slipping away. His chest barely rose and fell. His eyes had rolled back into his head and his body was slack, a faint breath the only sign he was still alive. Matt's hands were covered in blood as he tried to stem the flow, pressing down on the mangled stump in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. A bystander rushed to help, tearing off his shirt to tie a tourniquet around Lucas's leg, but it was too late. The damage was catastrophic. The femoral artery had been severed. In less than a minute, Lucas had lost enough blood that survival was impossible. Despite their frantic efforts, Lucas let out one last shuddering breath before his body went still. The ambulance arrived, but there was nothing anyone could do. Lucas's body was taken away, and Matt, in shock, was sedated and rushed to the hospital. The reality hit hard. His best friend was gone, and he was left to face the aftermath alone. The beach was closed as search efforts began. Boats and helicopters scoured the waters, but the shark was gone, leaving only the accounts of Matt and another surfer describing a massive predator. Memorials soon appeared on the beach, flowers and teddy bears marking Lucas's life. At the funeral, Matt carried his friend's body, grief overwhelming him. His dorm room felt impossibly empty, the surfboard in the corner untouched. It wasn't until a year later that Matt found the strength to return to the water. Surf Beach, where everything had changed, called to him. With Lucas's memory in his heart, Matt faced his fear, ready to find joy in the ocean again. August 19th, 2018 was warm and windless along Australia's northern coast. The sun hung low over Byron Bay, casting long shadows across the empty shoreline where red warning flags flapped idly in the breeze. A lifeguard truck sat locked behind the gates of a closed beach access road, and beyond it, clear signage read, "Beach closed. Shark sightings reported. No swimming." The warning had been in place for days, issued after multiple drone patrols recorded a large great white patrolling just offshore. But late that afternoon, 5 teenagers ducked under the gate and made their way down the sand, laughing, filming, and ignoring everything they'd been told. 17-year-old Liam Norwick had planned the moment all week. He wasn't a thrill-seeker in the traditional sense. He didn't skydive or surf, but he lived for the kind of content that turned heads on social media. His friends called him the main character, partly in jest, partly because Liam leaned into it. At school, he was the one narrating lunchtime stories with perfect comedic timing. Online, he'd film fake stunts, reaction videos, and clips of himself getting chased by public security guards. He wanted attention, and that afternoon he had a plan to get footage of himself swimming past the closed zone buoys, throw in some muscle flexing and jokes, and maybe go viral for pushing the rules. The group set up their phones in the sand just beyond the flagged zone. Liam stripped off his shirt, grinned for the camera, and waded into the surf with exaggerated flexes and mock bravado. He shouted something about not being scared of fish before diving through a shallow wave and surfacing a few yards out. One phone zoomed in, another captured behind-the-scenes commentary. None of them noticed the ripple near the second buoy. A few moments later, the water behind Liam exploded in a violent splash. His scream was sharp and short-lived, loud enough to startle the group into silence. Then he vanished. What no one had seen just beneath the surface was the strike of a great white shark. These apex predators are ambush hunters capable of reaching over 15 feet in length and weighing upwards of 2,000 pounds. Their bite force exceeds 4,000 pounds per square inch, enough to sever limbs or split a seal in two. In murky coastal waters like those near Byron Bay, they hunt by silhouette, tracking prey from below and launching upward with devastating speed. Drone footage from earlier that week had confirmed one patrolling the area, and the beach had been closed for a reason. It was a known hunting corridor, made even more dangerous by the splash, motion, and noise of a lone swimmer breaking the surface. At first, Liam's friends thought he was playing. The camera kept rolling, but when he didn't resurface, his closest friend sprinted into the water, yelling his name. What he found was a cloud of blood spreading in slow spirals and a strip of fabric, part of Liam's board shorts floating on the surface. Panic broke out. One boy ran toward the access road to get a signal and call for help. Another collapsed on the beach, screaming into his hands. Phones were dropped, voices cracked, and the laughter that had filled the air just minutes before was gone. Paramedics arrived 30 minutes later, but there was nothing left to do. The boys had pulled Liam back toward shore, but he had already lost too much blood. His leg had been severed at the hip. The great white had bitten once and vanished. Textbook behavior for a large shark mistaking prey. The medical report later confirmed what responders already knew. Liam had bled out within minutes of the attack. The location matched drone footage from earlier that week, confirming the presence of the same shark that had triggered the original beach closure. Despite the warnings, despite the signs, he jumped in anyway. Video from the day circulated briefly before being taken down. It wasn't graphic, it showed Liam flexing, swimming, laughing. But it captured the lead-up so clearly that investigators used it to piece together the timeline. Interviews with the group revealed the pattern. They knew the beach was closed, they thought the warning was overblown, and they never imagined something could go so wrong so quickly. The attack reignited national debate about digital culture, teenage risk-taking, and the growing trend of dangerous stunts staged for social media clout. A memorial was held at Liam's high school gymnasium the following Friday. Hundreds attended. Students, teachers, local families. His parents didn't speak, but his younger brother read from a list of things Liam had planned to do. Study abroad, start a clothing brand, get a tattoo their mom wouldn't approve of. Friends described him as funny, loyal, full of energy, and always looking for the next big moment. There was no villain to prosecute. The beach had been closed, the warnings were obvious, and the shark had acted as nature intended. What made it harder to accept was how avoidable it all was. Liam didn't die because of bad luck, he died because he made a reckless choice, ignoring every posted sign and every recent report for the sake of a stunt. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a chain of impulsive decisions that ended exactly the way experts warn they can. And now, his story is told as a reminder of what happens when thrill wins out over sense. March 14, 2015 was clear and windless along the rugged coastline of Duker Point, just south of Cape Town. The Atlantic shimmered with deceptive calm, lapping gently against the base of towering cliffs that had become a magnet for thrill seekers. The waves slapped rhythmically against the rocks, birds wheeled overhead, and on top of the cliff a group of university students stood barefoot in the sun, daring each other toward the edge. They weren't tourists, they were locals. They knew the coast, knew the rumors, and knew that below them the water churned with currents colder and deeper than it looked. But that afternoon, they didn't care. The plan was simple: cliff diving. No wetsuits, no gear, just a quick plunge into the open ocean and a scramble back onto the rocks. Among them was 22-year-old Jordan Macefield, tall, athletic, and the kind of extrovert people naturally followed. Jordan had always leaned into risk. He was the one who suggested Duker Point in the first place. The area had a reputation known for its dramatic rock faces and deep entry points. It offered one of the few spots where you could jump from over 30 feet into the ocean without hitting reef or sand. But it also carried another much darker reputation. The nearby rocks were home to a seal colony, dozens of slick barking bodies that sunbathed on the shoreline and slipped like shadows into the water. And where there are seals in the Cape, there are great white sharks. The group knew this. Signs had been posted a year earlier after multiple shark sightings, warning against swimming or diving in the area. Local rangers had updated the advisory list just 2 days before, noting increased predatory activity in the shallows. But by the time Jordan and his friends arrived that morning, the surf was low, the cliffs were dry, and the temptation was stronger than the caution. One by one, the group began to jump. Jordan was last. He raised his arms, shouted something no one quite heard, and hurled himself off the ledge. He hit the water cleanly and surfaced a moment later, grinning and throwing his fist in the air. The others cheered from above. But then, without warning, something massive surged from below. There was no splash, no warning fin, just a violent jolt that pulled Jordan backward under the surface as if a rope had been yanked from the deep. A few seconds passed, then the water near the jump site turned red. Great white sharks are deeply woven into the marine ecosystem of South Africa's Western Cape. Duker Point, just south of Cape Town, lies along the edge of what's known as the Shark Alley Corridor, where cold Benguela currents meet rich breeding grounds for seals, tuna, and other prey. Here, great whites don't migrate through, they stay. Scientists have tracked the same individuals returning year after year, using coastal shelves and sea colonies as ambush points. Their hunting relies on stealth. They strike upward, fast and silent, using the contrast of sunlight on the surface to target silhouettes. In areas like this, where rocky outcrops host hundreds of seals, and human activity overlaps with feeding zones, a splash in the wrong place can look exactly like a kill trigger. Jordan had leapt into the center of their territory. At first, the group thought it was a prank. Jordan was known for stunts, and the sudden disappearance looked staged. But when he didn't resurface and when a second cloud of blood appeared, darker and whiter than the first, the mood shifted. Screaming erupted. One of the students tried to climb down the cliff toward the shoreline while another ran for cell reception. A third called emergency services as the rest stared helplessly at the calm surface where their friend had vanished just seconds earlier. Rescue teams arrived within the hour. The National Sea Rescue Institute launched a search using boats, divers, and a helicopter equipped with thermal imaging. They scanned the coastline for hours. No body was ever found. A single torn swim fin was recovered near the edge of the seal rocks. But beyond that, there was nothing. Officials confirmed that shark activity had been recorded in the area days earlier and reiterated that Duker Point had never been a sanctioned diving location. A temporary restriction was issued, and signs were reposted with more prominent warnings. Jordan's university held a memorial later that week. Flowers, stories, and a worn photo of him mid-jump on a hiking trip, suspended in the air with his arms wide open. friends remembered him as fearless, impulsive, and always chasing the next thrill. But even those closest to him admitted he pushed too far. He saw the warnings and jumped anyway. June 15, 2013 was the kind of Florida evening that felt like it could last forever. On a stretch of beach near Marathon in the Florida Keys, college students gathered around a fire pit, the air thick with salt, smoke, and cheap beer. Music played from a Bluetooth speaker half buried in the sand. Laughter came easy. The stars were bright, it was a summer break. And for Amber Keplar, 21, this was exactly the kind of night she lived for. But some waters, no matter how calm they seem, are never safe to step into, especially when the sun goes down. Amber had driven down from Tallahassee with 3 friends to celebrate the end of finals. She was loud in the best way, with sun-bleached hair, chipped nail polish, and a tendency to burst into song when no one expected it. A journalism major with a part-time waitressing job, she wasn't the type to play it safe. She was the type who jumped in without checking the water. Just before midnight, with most of the group winding down or passed out in camp chairs, Amber and her closest friend Lizzie, still buzzed from drinks and glowing with that carefree recklessness unique to 20-somethings on vacation, decided to skinny dip. It wasn't a dare, it wasn't planned. They just looked at each other, grinned, and ran for the surf, peeling off clothes and tossing them behind as they laughed their way down the sand. Locals had long avoided that particular inlet after dark, not because of tides or currents, but because the nearby dockside fish cleaning stations leaked into the shallows, drawing predators close. But sharks especially were known to patrol the warm coastal waters at night, hunting in silence just beyond the moonlit foam. Bull sharks are among the few large shark species that actively hunt in shallow coastal waters, and at night they become even more dangerous. With poor light to navigate by, they rely on vibration and movement, zeroing in on splashes that mimic struggling fish or injured prey. Unlike great whites that stalk from the deep, bull sharks patrol close to shore, sometimes in less than 3 feet of water. They're territorial, quick to react, and bold enough to strike without hesitation. For swimmers unaware or careless, the line between safe and fatal can disappear in seconds. The 2 girls waded in waist deep, their laughter echoing into the dark. Amber splashed ahead, arms raised, spinning as she fell backward into the water. Her friend stayed closer to shore, shivering from the sudden chill and hesitating from the sudden quiet. Then Amber screamed. It wasn't drawn out, it was sharp, immediate, and followed by thrashing so violent it sent water spraying in all directions. Lizzie turned in time to see Amber's leg disappear beneath the surface. Then her entire body dragged several feet into the deeper channel. She surfaced once, eyes wide, gasping, but the water around her was already tinted with blood. Lizzie swam back to shore in a panic, screaming for help. A few others ran toward the surf, confused, still half drunk. One tried to wade in, but the water was clouded and opaque, the tide pushing against him with eerie calm. Someone called 911 from a cell phone held aloft with shaking hands. Amber washed up 12 minutes later, pulled in by the tide. She was barely conscious, her leg torn open from thigh to knee, her body in shock. Paramedics arrived less than 10 minutes after that, but by then she had lost too much blood. CPR was attempted on the sand, lights flashing against pale faces and glass bottles, but her pulse never returned. She was declared dead at the scene. Officials identified the bite pattern as consistent with a bull shark, likely an adult male, drawn to the noise and motion in a shallow feeding zone. No search for the shark was initiated. The beach was temporarily closed and additional warning signs were installed along the access path. Local anglers had reported frequent shark presence for weeks prior, but without a specific threat, no formal action had been taken. Amber's friends packed up the next morning and drove home in silence. Her family held a small memorial at a marina near their home in Clearwater, where she'd grown up learning to swim, dive, and push boundaries just enough to keep life interesting. She was remembered for her laugh, her boldness, and her habit of diving in without always checking how deep the water was. The beach reopened, the fire pit was cleaned, the tide rolled on like nothing had happened. But for the people who were there that night, it wasn't the shark they remembered, it was the decision, one that never should have been made.